the bluest, wokest progressives out there, and anyone in between, anyone with any other assortment of views, you are welcome here. I hope all such people are represented in this room right now. So why? Why would we bother trying to bring that kind of crowd together? Well, we here at Braver Angels believe that the best way to live well in this really polarized age that we're in is to really get to know people on all sides of these political divides. We won't solve our major problems here today, but maybe what we'll do is create a space in which those problems can be solved. We will listen to each other with open minds and open hearts, and that will set the stage for, again, all of you to contribute to solving the problems that plague our country, this great nation that we all love. And I am not picking on the president right now. There are problems that plague our country from the red and blue view. I have no formal opinion today. My panelists will tell you what they think in just a little bit. But, okay, so let me tell you about our debate program. We do a lot more than just debates at Braver Angels, but you're at a debate. The debate program is the one I run, so I'm going to spend some time on it. The main thing we do is something called a community debate. If you log on online, that's usually what we'll offer. In some alliances, as we call our member groups alliances, because it's reds and blues coming together, that's our chapters. Alliances can run in-person debates. Usually, a community debate is a place where anyone can stand up and give a speech. Free, grassroots place, forum to say what you think about whatever the resolution is. And so if you want to get involved, help pick out some resolutions for your local Braver Angels Alliance to debate, come talk to us after the event. There are local leaders here and we can connect you with them. But also there are some online on Zoom. This Tuesday, we will be doing an online debate on social media and moderation policies. So come talk to us about that if you want. You can email my team, debates@braverangels.org. And remember that if there's anything you want to get involved in, anything you want to learn more about, reach out to that email address and we will get back to you. But yeah, so community debates are the main thing, a chance for you to speak in your community. Join us on Tuesday if you would like to try that online. But here today, in this great swing state of Michigan, we have decided to bring you what we consider our marquee event, our very special event that we call a Coliseum debate. We have pulled together a panel that we consider especially thought-provoking, relevant, with complementary takes. We seek to offer you here a representation of the breadth of thought on a single resolution. We will have our panelists take a side. That's what the debate program does. You must always choose whether you're in the affirmative or the negative. We polarize to depolarize, if you will. We say, take a stand and then talk to each other and see what happens. So each of our speakers will therefore help us paint this complex, nuanced picture of the spectrum of thought on this issue. Kind of like, we're all those proverbial blind men describing the different parts of the elephant. We'll hear about the trunk, the tail, the ears, the feet, and you can put it together as you like. Each speaker today, and in any of our debates, speaks only for himself. They're not on teams. We also are not going to have you vote on a winner. If you're so moved, you can express agreement or appreciation by something called tapping. Try this, like just bang on your, you see how you can speak over me and you can still hear me, and that's just a way to sort of be like, yeah, you're making me think. No one will assume you agree. You could be saying, yeah, good job, you made me think. I totally disagree, but it's a good point, right? So hopefully you'll get some of that today. But yeah, so it's maybe, cheer for your own team, but also remember we are all here on the same team, the American team. So, all right. I think you probably agree with that because you showed up here today. It's a complicated world we live in. Whether you're looking for objective intellectual truth or subjective emotional truth, what do you hear in the people that you think are your opponents? Is there a synthesis to be made out of the thesis and the antithesis? You get to be the judge. I would posit that's the way forward for our country, and that's why we do what we do on the Braver Angels debate team. So yeah, we're starting with the debate, but I hope you will stick around afterward because we're going to have a little afterglow. This is a really important part of the process. You're going to be listening to our panel, and then I'd like you to get a chance to talk about it because you'll probably have thoughts. Come talk to our local leaders. Come talk to our panelists. Come talk to me and my team. We have many. If you work for Braver Angels staff, raise your hand. We have several. Yep. Okay. Thank you. And then local Michigan volunteer leaders, raise your hand. So quite a lot of them here today. You will get a chance to identify. I'll have them come up later so you know who they are, but they will be here for you to talk to. Let's see. Want to make sure I don't miss anything. There's a lot going on. So you will hear from our local leaders after the debate. And then we'll have our social. They're going to wheel in food. You've got your drink tickets. If you didn't get a drink ticket, just let me know and I'll make sure you do. That comes after the debate. But first things first. Here's how the debate is going to work. We'll begin with a speaker in the affirmative and alternate between all four of them. Each of them will get up to 6 minutes for their first speech. Then I will take 3 to 4 questions from you guys in the audience. I'll invite you, raise your hand, come up and ask your question here. We'll then move to a second round where the speakers will go in roughly reverse order, but I'll keep the affirmative negative order. And they can add any further thoughts after having heard the first round. So when you ask a question, I'm going to ask that you abide by a ritual that has come to characterize our Braver Angels debate program. It comes from something called parliamentary procedure. And that is that you only ever get to address the chair, which will be me today. After I gavel this in, I will be known as Madam Chair, and I'm the only person you get to talk to. So if you say you in a question, I will say, you're asking me, and you're probably not. They have more interesting opinions than I do. So let's see. I am looking for a speech on cats and dogs. Can you stand up and just speak really loud? You have a loud voice.
I do have a loud voice. So this involves cats are better than dogs.
That's correct.
So I am happy to address there today on the issue of are cats better than dogs or dogs better than cats. I think it's unambiguous that any patriotic American must admit that cats are better than dogs. And my reasons for this, I have only 2 that I will here divulge immediately. Number 1 is that French bulldogs and Scottish terriers are stealing jobs from American children. This is a terrifying injustice and economic crime against the natives of our country. Second of all, I would like to remind the American employer, if there are any here present.
Out of time.
Oh. I'm going to say this is a good joke. Cats have 9 lives. You'll have to buy life insurance, health insurance for them towards the end.
And with that, our speaker is thanked. And I am looking for questions for our speaker. Do I have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could the speaker address the relative cuteness of dogs and cats and how that fits into his argument?
To our speaker.
I think it is, so this question is difficult for me to answer because I think on the very face of it, cats win, hands down. I would also like to point out that there are many cats that have extra little, digits. And so it's almost like a thumb, they can do fine manipulation of complex objects in a way that slobbery creatures cannot.
Our speaker and our questioners are thanked. The thing you were supposed to notice in that show is that he speaks, the questioner says, Madam Chair, does the speaker believe? Would the speaker elaborate? That's basically how you do it. The reason we do this is it allows us to venture into things that can be a little bit more personal. One of the rules is, this is not personal. This is about issues, ideas. So that's why we do that. Let's see. I do also have a gavel, so you don't want to mess with me. But all right. Also, when you ask a speech or when you ask a question, please keep it a brief question. Notice I called time on him. You want to get to it quickly, and if you don't, I'll say, is there a question in there? So our speakers are here to give speeches. We'll hear your opinions afterward at the afterglow. And our speakers know that we'll try to keep those contained so we can move through them. All right. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our panel. In the affirmative, we have Wilk Wilkinson. Wilk, will you wave? Okay. Wilk is a devoted husband, a loving father, and a steadfast Christian conservative, and the insightful host of the Derate the Hate podcast. His journey has been marked by resilience, introspection, and a commitment to learning from his mistakes. In the negative, we have Harold Meyerson. Harold? The editor-at-large of the American Prospect and a longtime columnist for the Washington Post. His recent piece in the Prospect, For a Left Nationalism, showcased the kind of analysis that I would love to see more of in an age that's toying with political realignment. Returning to the affirmative, we have Daniel McCarthy, the editor-in-chief of Modern Age. There are a few magazines back there, maybe you saw them. Modern Age, a conservative review. His thoughtful analysis, including his New York Times piece entitled, This is Why Trump Won, has helped both sides make sense of our ongoing political upheaval. And we will wrap up with our second negative, Jason Krisiak. Am I saying that right, Jason?
Yes, thank you. You got really closer than my third grade teacher.
My work here is done. Jason Krisiak is a union tradesman and at the Ford Motor Company and the Sergeant at Arms for the United Auto Workers Local 245. He seeks to help build a multicultural working class movement by engaging UAW members who support President Trump with more class-conscious dialogue. I am grateful to all of them for joining us here today. So, before we get started, I have one last thing. We kick off all of our debates with a reading of the Braver Angels Way. So I'd like to invite one of the leaders of the Washtenaw County Alliance, Benita, right there in front of me, to come up here and read it for us.
Thank you, Jesse. My great honor to read this. So, the Braver Way. We state our views freely and fully without fear. We treat people who disagree with us with honesty, dignity, and respect. We welcome opportunities to engage with those with whom we disagree. We believe all of us have blind spots and none of us are not worth talking to. We seek to disagree accurately, avoiding exaggeration and stereotypes, and we look for common ground if it exists and ways to work together if possible.
Thank you, Benita. And with that, I call this debate to order. The resolution on the table is resolved. The Republican Party is the party of the working class. We now turn to Wilk Wilkinson for our first speech in the affirmative. Wilk, the podium is yours. You have up to 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the soul of a political party is not revealed only through its policies, but through the people who believe in it. I am somebody who, I'm going to share a bit about my own personal story and why I call myself a conservative in an age that conservatism sometimes gets a pretty bad rap. There are things that happen in politics that dissuade a lot of people from even engaging in politics. And as I was growing up as somebody who was very poor in the Midwest, with parents who struggled immensely sometimes just to give us some of the most basic needs, we had to dip into that social safety net that this beautiful country has provided for many. But one of the things that I saw growing up in working class, small towns in America was the idea that a safety net is not a lifestyle. A safety net is something that should be used sparingly or as a last cause. There's a lot of dignity in the idea of work and working to better our lives. I've been a blue collar guy most of my life, and people ask me, you know, has the Republican Party become the party of the working class. I would contend that the Republican Party has been and continues to be the party of the working class. It's just now that many people are starting to realize that and gravitate more towards that. When a person works for the things that they have or wants for things that they don't have, but then has to work for it, there's a lot of dignity in that. We've seen over the past several decades where more people are coming to realize that a society that's built upon a government that is going to try to give you everything starts to tear away at the fabric of who we are and our drive to be better people, a better society. So over the past several decades, we've seen the numbers show that more and more people are voting Republican. I think that's because of a couple of things, right? We see that the party that claimed for so long to be the party of the working class has kind of left behind a lot of those people. They started to focus their efforts on things that didn't necessarily reflect their values. They weren't the things that people were talking about at their kitchen tables, the things that people are struggling to take care of in their everyday lives. How do I pay this electric bill? How do I put gas in my car today? Is my paycheck this month going to be enough to pay my rent or my mortgage? How do I buy clothes for my children? So my story and the things that I talk about when it comes to is the Republican Party the party of the working class, I say yes, it is. Because a safety net is not a lifestyle. A safety net is something that we should lean on only when it's absolutely necessary. I've been there. My family has been there. But I also know that by working through those things, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and actually making something happen through the dignity of work, through self-perseverance, through the idea that if I continue to put my shoulder to the grindstone, I can make things happen. The other part of this is when we talk about those kitchen table issues, I don't want to discount the idea that there's a lot of importance in being able to fulfill our obligations if we sign a contract. One of the things that has bothered so many people, whether it be people in machine shops or warehouses or truck drivers, I've been in the transportation industry for a long time. A lot of these people never took out a student loan. They never took out a student loan, but over the past several years, we keep on hearing, oh, we're going to forgive all these student loans. We're going to forgive all these student loans. There's no such thing as forgiveness. It's going to be paid back by somebody. And when people started to realize that somebody was going to be them for a loan that they never took, for a thing that they didn't partake in, they didn't like it. That's just one small example. But the realization for a lot of people that, okay, these people, if a college degree is so well worth it, which the average college person with a bachelor's degree in this country over the course of their life is going to make somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million more than the average person in the trades, like me as a truck driver or you know a plumber or a warehouse worker, a guy in a machine shop. When they say, oh, we're going to pay back a loan that we didn't take for somebody who's going to make more money than me over the course of my life, it just didn't fit. It didn't sit well. So I think the Republican Party is not what people make it out to be. The Republican Party is that party of perseverance, of we are going to speak to the dignity and speak to the importance of work, and people are going to be what they need to be to be the best that they can be, and that's what we are as Americans. Thank you for the time.
We're now looking for questions for this speaker. Would anyone like to step up to the podium, the microphone, and ask your question to the chair?
I don't know if I'm going to ever reach
You can
that.
take
It's
it out.
okay.
Just start jumping.
I can take it out. Oh, tilt it down. Well, anyway. Okay. Sorry. I have that problem at karaoke too. I'm like, anyway, I'm sorry. Madam Chair, would the speaker address the issue of the working poor? I'm in a situation where my 2 adult children are both receiving Medicaid right now, and they both work full-time or as many hours as they can get. I also think about the fact that, at least at some point in the past, Walmart workers were earning a wage that made them need social services at a much higher rate. So I feel like we were subsidizing, or, we're covering that. I don't mind covering it. Thank you. I'm sorry. Did you get my question?
Yes.
Okay.
Our speaker.
I think that's a fantastic question, and it goes to one of the biggest problems that I think we face in this country is the idea that we subsidize, as a nation, we subsidize labor in industries that it's hard to make sense of it. I think it's a very complicated issue, but through our what was supposed to be a safety net, it turned into a social subsidization of labor in markets that may not provide the monetary value for the amount of labor that's being put into it, if that makes any sense. This is the way that I see it anyway. Through that safety net, we made it easy enough for employers to then use the government to subsidize things that they didn't have to pay the wage that needs to be paid for the labor that's being expended. I think that's a government problem that needs to be addressed. And as far as all the complexities of it, I think it's tough. I think the worst thing that we could do is actually tell employers they have to pay more to build a living wage, because that increases inflation, and then we end up getting back to where we started. Medicaid, I think, is important. I think to have being a first world country, I think having the ability to provide a safety net program for people like Medicaid, which I think is important for people who cannot provide for themselves. But I think the bigger and root cause of that is the fact that we as a nation built a system that now has to be repaired, because we built a system that's going to subsidize a wage problem that isn't actually a wage problem. It's something else.
Further questions for this speaker? Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Madam Chair, I am wondering to the speaker, I agree with what the speaker said about like the value of work. I agree with some of those things. I guess my question is, this resolution is about the Republican Party being the party of the working class people. And my question is, what Republican proposals or initiatives have been introduced that address these issues? Like, it almost seems like you're arguing against both parties in a sense, or the speaker is arguing against both parties. I'm new. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I think that's another amazing question. It's a phenomenal question. If anybody's ever listened to my podcast or any of my speeches, they know that I often say those who represent us are not the best of us. And the reason I say that is because we have huge problems on both sides of the aisle. With regard to the questioner's specific question, what proposals, there's really only one party that's working towards deregulation in this country. I know in the first Trump administration, I think there was something in the order of 20,000 pages from the removed from the books of federal regulations. The federal regulations, any party. Well, to quote one of my somebody that I consider a mentor, Dennis Prager, he says the smaller the government, or the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. And when I think of any a political party, when I talked in my opening statement about the soul of a political party, if the soul of that political party is to increase the leviathan that the federal government is, they are looking to decrease, in my opinion, the size of the citizen, the role of the citizen. So I naturally gravitate to the idea of a smaller government and a bigger personal responsibility, a bigger role as a citizen within our society.
And I think I saw one other hand back there. Do we have a question?
My question is, and thank you so much, it was a lovely speech. Why is the Republican conservative side so against unions, since unions help create that strength of the people over the authority? And also, I would like to know if you have any suggestions on, if the speaker has any suggestions on a better solution to the student loan problem. My generation, are working these Walmart jobs that are not making anything, or these blue collar jobs, because we don't have unions. The pay, the benefits are just awful. So we go to college, that's like an arm and a leg, and then we get stuck with these huge loans and we can't pay them off, and then we get crushed down. So what's a better solution?
Student loans and unions.
So, yeah, thank you.
Another wonderful question. Very complex, obviously. So to the point on unions, and I'm only going to speak for myself on this, and this could go on to another entirely different speech. But I would say that with regard to unions, I love the idea of being able to collectively gather and put our minds together and be part of something bigger to try and negotiate bigger and better things for us as individuals. Where I fall into on the idea of unions is collectivism. Collectivism, I think, is for somebody who, like me, who thinks a lot more about personal responsibility and personal accountability. The idea of collectivism gets a little wonky for me. I personally have no problem with people that want to join a private sector union, in that, if people at a particular organization want to collectivize and to do better things for them and their coworkers, I got no problem with that. I have an absolutely huge problem with the idea of collective unionization in government. So I think that's a huge problem. That's about as much as I can say about that. When it comes to the student loan things, if we look at the amount of government involvement in post-secondary education in the United States over the past several decades, what we have seen is the more the government becomes involved, the more expensive the colleges have become. And as they have become more expensive, they have also become more indoctrinative, in that the product that is being paid for primarily through taxpayer funding and things like that, especially if we tried to quote unquote forgive these student loans, the product being produced is quite often hostile to America, hostile to the ideals that many people, again, are talking about at their kitchen table. So when it comes to the idea of student loans, if we continue to have government involved in post-secondary education, which there's a direct correlation to the cost increases in post-secondary education, and it's producing a horrible product, we have a big problem. We need to root cause problem solve that. We need to work backwards and try to get back to a time when post-secondary education actually did something positive, and then we can talk about that in greater detail.
And with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked.
Thank you.
I am now looking for our speech, next speech in the negative. With that, Harold Meyerson, you have 6 minutes.
I want to begin with the last line of the Gettysburg Address, in which Lincoln spoke of a government of the people, by the people, for the people, which should not perish from the earth. I do that because the question is the Republican Party the party of the working class? And, you know, Lincoln was a pretty damn good writer, and he sort of understood that he had a rising order of prominence there, of at the lowest level, by at the mid-level, for at the ultimate level. So I want to kind of get into in a bit, is the Republican Party a party for the working class? Well, let's look at what's happened to the working class in this country. The Pew Research Center, which is a nonpartisan research center, has been compiling data since 1970 on what percentage of household income goes to the top 20%, the middle 60%, and the bottom 20%. In 1970, the middle class, the working class, got 62% of all the household income in America. In 2022, the last year that the Pew Foundation did this, that 62% had become 43%. As to the lower class, they didn't have much, you know, they got 10% in 1970 and 8% in 2022. Where did that money go? To the upper class, which only got 29% of the household income in the United States in 1970, but that rose to 48% in 2022. A kind of similar study was done by the Rand Corporation, which is an outgrowth of Pentagon think tanks at the end of World War II. Again, not a partisan organization. And what they were calculating was a question of, if we had the same economic equality and inequality levels that we had in 1975, had they stayed the same, how would workers be faring in the United States today? Well, that's a lot of workers in a lot of years. They figured that if it had stayed the same, if inequality had not grown, an additional 79 trillion, not billion, not million, $79 trillion would have gone to American workers in that period. Or another way of putting it, today, the median American worker full-time has an income on a median average of $60,000. If it was still the same levels of equality and inequality of 1975, it would be double that, 120,000. So what happened in that first period of the first 30 years after World War II that made it so different from today? One was that working class could, as Wilk said, come together and bargain. And 35% of the American workforce was in unions in the 1950s. In Michigan, it was probably a little over 50%. Today, in the private sector, just under 6% of Americans are in unions. And that's not because Americans, you know, don't like unions. The latest approval ratings have unions listed above almost all institutions in approval rating of over 70%. That was also a time when taxes were really progressive. We look back at the 1950s. They actually peaked under Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican president, in which the highest bracket of income had to pay about 91%, only for the highest bracket, only for, you know, their income over several $million. You know, when you think back to the 1950s, and when I was a little kid, there really weren't very many American billionaires, and you were either descended from a billionaire of the 19th century, like the Rockefeller family, or you were, a billionaire in oil. That was about it. J.P. Getty and the Hunt family. But that's what happened, and this is the 1950s, mind you, for which people on the left, like myself, point to the economic foundations, but people on the right point to, well, that's the model of the American family we want to keep. Well, it was the model of the American family because the working class could afford to marry, have families, and raise children on the income they were then making in this more egalitarian, economically egalitarian, certainly not racially egalitarian or gender egalitarian, but in this more egalitarian country. And as those incomes declined, the rate of working class marriage declined. Life expectancy, we now know, in the working classes declined, and not because of immigrants, it's declined among native-born whites. So it's really a different country. And, the question is, how do we get it back? That's a difficult question. And as Wilk said, both parties are complicit in what's happened since 1975. Republicans under Reagan started the movement towards free trade, and the Democrats, most of them, though not only a minority of the Democrats in the House, voted for those treaties. But if you look at the particular things going on right now, with Elon Musk's Doge cutting the experts who work on black lung disease for minors, with the Federal Trade Commission and the National Labor Relations Board striking down non-compete clauses. It means if you work for this barber, you can't go out and open your own barber shop. They've been discharged by Donald Trump, and he's going to put people in who will bring back those non-competes. Got rid of the people at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau who limited what banks can charge you on overdrafts. Well, they're gone, and that overdraft limit is now gone too. I'll say more later, and I'll take questions.
I see any questions?
If you don't have a question, I know a lot about songs of the 1920s.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair? Chair. Okay, I'm wondering if the speaker can address the idea that the Democratic Party may not have been listening to the kitchen table conversations that the first speaker spoke to, as well as have been reported in a variety of media, and I've heard through my family as well. Thank you.
Well, for a long time, that's true. One of the sort of results of what's different between the mid-20th century and today is the weakening of labor, which has been huge. The weakening has muted workers' voices in the Democratic Party. After the Republican Party moved to the right under Barry Goldwater, who was the only non-Southern senator to vote against the Civil Rights Act in 1964, there were a lot of, Wall Street types who said, well, that's crazy. We'll go ahead and join the Democratic Party. And the Rockefeller liberal wing of the Republican Party moved over to the Democratic Party. So you got a lot of people who didn't know from kitchen table discussions. And that's why under Bill Clinton, who was still governing under the paradigm that Ronald Reagan had set the decade before, you got NAFTA, you got permanent normal trade relations with China, and so on. Now, I think that parts of the Democratic Party began to swing back, with Bernie Sanders, AOC, et cetera, and there's a heightened awareness now that the weakening. I wrote a cover piece in The Nation in 1986 saying, if labor keeps declining, Democrats are going to stop winning working class votes and stop winning elections. That was 39 years ago. They didn't get it. More of them get it now, but still not enough.
With apologies to our online audience, I will use the microphone now. I'm looking for additional questions. Yes, to the man who thinks cats are better than dogs.
You're full of it on the cats and dogs thing, by the way.
Thank you. My question is actually largely informational because unfortunately I know so little about the current structure of union membership within the United States workforce. I was wondering if there are certain sectors where, for example, union membership is significantly higher than the norm, and if these could perhaps be used as a template or a model if one wished to actually expand union membership across other sectors of the economy.
That is a good question. Well, part of the decline of union membership is related to transformations in American manufacturing. That is to say, A, offshoring, but B, just, there are more machines and fewer people. If you go onto a steel mill, as I have, there are hardly any workers on what's called the shop floor. They're sitting and turning dials that regulate, the flow of the molten stuff that will become steel when they're done. The thing about the core of unions having been in manufacturing is that factories are really large. At least they were in the mid-century. We're here, the River Rouge, which is a few miles from where we are right now, actually employed 100,000 people in the 1940s and 50s. And once, so it's easy to concentrate on organizing that. If you want to organize Starbucks, they own 9,000 Starbucks outlets that may employ 30 people. How do you have enough organizers to do that? So legacy unions tend to be former manufacturing powerhouses. As Wilk said, public sector is quite different. Public sector unions often don't encounter the level of resistance that is common when you try to organize private sector workers. But retail is more spread out, and we've gone from a production economy to a service economy. Service economy is spread out, so that's hard. Right now, the easiest group of workers to organize tend to be university grad students who are teaching assistants. I draw no lessons from this. I did a calculation. The NLRB election showed that 89% of those 50-some thousand, more than 50,000 to 100,000 students that have voted to join unions as grad student teaching assistants in the last few years voted yes. The other problem is, there's really no dedicated union for them. They joined one of 9 different unions that go fishing in those pools because they can catch the fish. And that's why the UAW represents Wayne State and the University of California.
And for one final question for this speaker. Were you waiting in line? Okay. Enthusiasm is rewarded.
My question for the speaker is, my concern is that this speech, it had a lot of quotes, it had a lot of stats, it had a lot of information. And when you compare it to our first speaker's speech and the story and the heart and the messaging behind that, in my opinion, that is what Democrats do wrong every single day. Like, they don't have that messaging right. And they get up in front of people and they spew stats and they say things and they have this elitist air, I think. And unfortunately, that's a difficult message for some people to hear. So I guess my question is, thank you. My question for the speaker is, I was struggling to articulate what this question is, but basically my question is, how can the Democrats really say that they're the party of the working people when they don't know how to speak to working people?
Excellent question.
It is a good question. And my first answer is that's why I am not ever going to run. For any office. My job is not the job of winning elections. And I actually, even before I was a journalist, did some campaign consultings, and I would have never have advised any of the candidates I was working for to talk the way I do. You know, but there are Democrats who do talk the talk and walk the walk. Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, was one. Sherrod lost the last election largely because, well, for a number of reasons, including that the cryptocurrency industry, which wants free reign to do whatever scams they want to do, dumped a ton of money on his opponent. You know, but you're right. Democrats have been, you know, not good at messaging, and this kind of reached the absurd conclusion with Joe Biden, who was not even capable of speaking in a persuasive and sometimes even intelligible way. So yeah, you're right. But I think if you look at what the two parties are actually going to do to help workers, which was the second part I didn't have a chance to get to. You know, I think there are ways that talk can go on. And look, you know, one of the Republicans, I think, and most anti-working things is their opposition to making labor law more functional, so more American workers can express their will and join unions. Okay.
And with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. We now return to the affirmative. Daniel McCarthy, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. When we see a resolution that says the Republican Party is the party of the working class, I think we're all tempted to interpret that as the Republican Party has the best message for the working class, or the working class should be voting for the Republicans. And then we go from there perhaps into investigating what the particular policies are that draw or might draw the working class to the Republican Party. But in thinking about the topic, it occurred to me that actually there are two other approaches that should be taken to that question. The first is simply that the Republican Party is, in fact, the party of the working class based on whom they're voting for. Based on the fact that, you know, certainly in the last election, in really all of Donald Trump's elections, but even if you go back farther, even if you go back to the 2012 election, surprisingly enough, certainly if you go back to the Reagan era, you find that the working class, especially the white working class, tends to vote for the Republicans. You find among the voters in congressional races that there's also a tendency over time for working class voters to be moving in the direction of the Republican Party. Some of you may know that about 20 years ago, a journalist by the name of Thomas Frank wrote a book called What's the Matter with Kansas? And the thesis of that book was precisely that, again, this is around 2004, that working class voters in the state of Kansas were inclined to keep voting Republican no matter what. And they were doing this oftentimes in the face of what Thomas Frank, who was a progressive writer, thought were very anti-labor and very anti-working class economic policies. Nevertheless, the working class was still voting Republican because they sympathized much more with the Republican Party in terms of its cultural agenda. Now, there is a tendency among people in Washington, D.C., where I come from, and perhaps in other parts of the country as well, to think that you have a kind of Machiavellian cast of manipulators at the top of the party who are able to fool the voters into voting for an agenda or a candidate that is actually bad for them. But I seem to recall that one of the other great quotes from Abraham Lincoln involves this idea that you can't really fool all the people all the time, that in fact voters are a lot smarter than analysts, a lot smarter than journalists, a lot smarter than politicians give them credit for being. Now, what I take from this is that if, in fact, the working class is increasingly voting for Republicans and does have a tendency to vote for Republican candidates, this indicates to me that the working class knows something that the pundits don't know, that it actually has a good reason. It has not been fooled. It is not suffering from false consciousness. It has not been duped. This is true even if the Republicans are offering policies that many intellectuals think are bad for the working class. Nevertheless, the working class, as the judge of their own case and their own condition, increasingly see the Republican Party as being their party. Now, because of this, the second thing I want to say about the relationship between the working class and the Republican Party is that the Republican Party, for its own interest, necessarily has to be the party of the working class. We saw that in this last election, that in order to win the swing states, the battleground states, the Republican Party had to be capable of presenting a message that was attractive to working class voters. The Republican Party would not be able to win these states if it did not have that message, and if it does not continue to double down and triple down on trying to reach working class voters. The Republican Party more generally, because it has this working class base that is increasingly a component of its coalition electorally, it has to be capable of delivering for them. There are opportunities for new politicians like J.D. Vance, like Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, first of all, to advance within the Republican Party by speaking more favorably towards the working class, and second of all, to advance in national politics by doing so as well. So the Republican Party, first of all, is the party of the working class by the choice of the working class voters themselves. And second of all, it has to remain the party of the working class by the necessities that are facing the Republican Party for winning elections. Now, finally, just to wrap up, I want to say a few words about the contrast between the Democratic and the Republican parties and why, despite all the minutiae that we might get into about economic policy and labor policy, why it might be that working class voters have a propensity to vote Republican rather than Democrat. And I want to say in all fairness, I think there are three characteristics of the Democratic Party which both Democrats and Republicans might agree are in fact elements of that party. First of all, the Democratic Party tends to be the party of government services. It's the party of the New Deal. It's the party of the Great Society. Second, the Democratic Party is an internationalist party. And in the center of the Democratic Party, that means that the Democrats emphasize the need to have allies and coalitions. On the left wing of the Democratic Party, on the other hand, this internationalism often takes a form that is very critical of America. And, Ronald Reagan's UN ambassador, Jane Kirkpatrick, referred to this as the blame America first wing of the Democratic Party, that its form of internationalism is basically to say that America is always making mistakes and the rest of the world is more correct. And then thirdly, the Democratic Party is certainly the more culturally progressive of the two political parties, and it has an investment in identity politics of race and gender and other things that are rather distinct from those of the Republican Party. Finally, I might also add that both parties in the Bill Clinton era and after that have become parties where you have a high concentration of progressively minded yuppie voters. But in the Democrats, you can see how these progressively minded yuppies combine with these other elements, internationalism, cultural progressivism, and government services, into a kind of leadership elite. The trouble is, however, first of all, while voters of all kinds, including the working class, like government services, they don't like government. And they don't like the folks in the media and elsewhere who are always making the case for the benevolence of government, because they see, in fact, their condition has often been worsened by the policies the government has followed. Second, in terms of internationalism, Americans do like that up to a point, but they prefer patriotism. They may even prefer nationalism. Third, in terms of cultural progressivism versus cultural conservatism, Americans, especially in the working class, are noted for having much more culturally conservative views rather than culturally progressive or woke views. So I think when you look at the two general ideological complexions of the party, it's clear why working class voters align more with Republicans than with Democrats. Thank you.
We're now looking for questions for this speaker. Do I have? Yes, here in the front.
Madam Chair, I thank the speaker for his very concise and well-prepared remarks. I think he has brought up a very important distinction that I think goes on in a lot of voters' minds, because I think that there's a temptation that was mentioned by at least a couple of the previous speakers that, we would tend to think that maybe policies would tend to drive voters one way or the other, but I think that the current speaker has brought up issues of sort of cultural identity and just sort of alliances with that. And it calls to mind a story that I had, or a conversation I had about 20 years ago with a union carpenter who said, yeah, his union, everybody endorsed John Kerry. He said, but all of us are voting for George W. Bush because Kerry's going to take away our guns. And so culture trumped policy at the time. And I guess I'd like to ask, the speaker to comment a little bit, to what extent does he think that the working class that has already self-selected to vote Republican, basically looks mostly just at cultural issues as opposed to looking at policies?
Thank you.
I would say that there is an enormous amount of political power which the working class could wield within the Republican Party in order to get more economic as well as cultural policy results that it wants to get. So if the voters come in the door because of cultural policies, once they're in the door, they can then organize and also have a say in economic policies and throughout, the party establishment. So that's the way I would advise the working class to think in those terms, that the party has, become a vessel for you in terms of cultural policy. And now that you have that, and now that the party is in fact dependent upon you, you can wield that power to make change with respect to other kinds of policy as well.
Further questions for this speaker? Looking at, okay, in the back.
Hi, you're a beautiful articulator. First, I'd like to know what is your
What is the speaker's?
what is the speaker's data that suggests that the Republican Party is not internationalistic or even foreign funded? For example, with the progressiveness, like the DEI programs that are being cut right now, they're being cut across the entire nation except for certain companies that Donald Trump is giving a break to. And these companies are actually funding foreign nations. Another question I have is,
Let's stick to just one question.
Okay.
Is that the question you want?
Actually, the question, can I do, may the speaker forgive me? This is the question I'd like to have. Is it patriotic or not to be critical of your own nation's policies?
Thank you. Thank you.
It is indeed patriotic to be critical of your own nation's policies. The difficulty is it going to be perceived as patriotic? And sometimes someone who has good reason for criticizing the nation's policies, nevertheless, is going to present that criticism in a way that people are going to take as being not just against the policy, but against the country. So certainly during the Iraq War, for example, I was among the rather few conservatives who were very critical of that foreign policy intervention, that invasion. And, I found Republicans like Ron Paul to be very sympathetic, who are also very critical of the Iraq War. And, in fact, the big conservative publication National Review wrote a cover story calling people like us unpatriotic conservatives for that. So, politics is about not just, what's right, but also how things are perceived. And with respect to the Democratic Party, I would say there is a mix here, because sometimes Democrats may be unfairly perceived as being unpatriotic. Other times, perhaps they have left-wing views that really are anti-American. You saw this during the Vietnam War to some extent. I would also say, to kind of wrap that part up, it's not even necessarily being unpatriotic or being seen as anti-American, but a question of, are you seen as simply not being actively pro-patriotic or pro-nationalist rather than internationalist in your outlook. So this is a problem where the capitalist wing, the more free trade-oriented wing of the Republican Party, is not really seen as being patriotic. And there's a reason for that, because really their economic view is internationalist, it's globalist. And we've seen both major parties have elites which have this globalist, internationalist outlook. And that doesn't go well with the American people, who say, actually, we are a people, we are a country, we should be looking out for Americans first in economic policy as well as in foreign policy.
And here to this gentleman for one final question.
Okay. Can the, Madam Chair, can the speaker talk about the long struggle between the elite internationalist billionaire part of the party and the Josh Hawley, Vance, actual more populist from an economic point of view? It seems like often the business side of the Republican Party wins and the other side doesn't. So
it's an ongoing battle, you're quite right, within the Republican Party. So Steve Bannon, who is one of the masterminds of Donald Trump's 2016 election, has been very critical of Elon Musk, very critical of the billionaires who are supporting the party. So there is, in fact, that friction within the party. You also see, going back 25 years, in fact 30 years really, and more, a conflict between sort of the Pat Buchanan wing of the party, which already in the early 1990s was talking about working class economic issues, talking about opposing free trade, for example, and the more internationalist George H.W. and then George W. Bush wing of the party, which was very favorable towards NAFTA and towards free trade. So there is a realignment going on within the Republican Party. I will say, I think it's actually one of the strengths of the GOP right now that it has this internal debate where it's able to kind of, that internal competition actually makes it stronger. Whereas the Democrats, especially with Joe Biden, but even going back before that, they've had a tendency to suppress dissent and to suppress factionalism within the party. And that's actually made them a weaker party overall.
And with that, our speaker and our questioners are thanked. And we are wheeling in the drinks. So we're just going to pause, Jason. So just in case this is just going to take a minute, I don't want you to have to talk over things. Perfect timing. We'll have one more speaker and then our final speeches, and then we'll have something to eat. Little stretch break if you need to stand up. Don't go anywhere though. It's going to be real fast. They warned me this would be loud. This is actually really quiet. So thank you guys.
If the worry is me talking over anything, it's not my
Okay.
concern.
You know what? I feel like we're good. I feel like
You feel like we're good?
okay. All right. Our final speaker in the negative, Jason Krzyzak. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Wilk, Harold, Dan. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Jesse. I'd like to thank my fellow debaters. I'd like to thank you for showing up today. I'd like to thank Braver Angels for putting this together. And I'd like to thank the people who are putting the glasses out and the food out, thank you for doing that. I'm going to start off with two kind of contextual quotes. One is by Bill Haywood, founding member of the Industrial Workers of the World. I've never read Marx's Capital, but I've got the marks of capital all over my body. That is in the bloodline of the American worker in the United States, and whether it's Democrat or Republican, they can't take that out. So that's been there since the founding of this country. I appreciate Bill Haywood for contextualizing that. The other one I want to reference Eugene Debs. This was a speech he gave opening his presidential campaign in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is currently a red state, but used to be a red state for other reasons, the good reasons. This was in 1904. The Republican and Democratic parties, or to be more exact, the Republican Democratic Party represents the capitalist class in the class struggle. They are the political wings of the capitalist system, and such differences as arise between them relate only to the spoils and not the principles. I believe that entirely, and that's the situation we find ourselves today in 2025. My life experience is that of the American working class. I was born the first child of a registered nurse and a truck driver. My mother worked for over 40 years at St. John's Hospital on Detroit's east side, tending and healing the working class in that part of town. My father moved the newest vehicles from the Chrysler plants in Jefferson and Sterling Heights for some 40 years as a proud Teamster car hauler. My dad carried his local 299 membership with pride, and his faith in unions and the unshakable belief in the strength of worker solidarity was something that I absorbed naturally when I was growing up. I carried these core convictions with me as I joined the United Automobile Workers and took a job at Ford Motor Company, where I've now worked for the last 28 years. In those 28 years, I have gotten married, I bought a house, I raised a family, and now I look forward to a comfortable retirement someday. I have 2 kids in school, so we'll see how that goes. 28 years is a long time, and we have had our fair share of struggles over the years. But the financial foundations of my union job held firm through all the uncertainties that our nation has encountered in the last 30 years. It is this real-life tumult that hardened my conviction and solidified my political orientation in working-class struggle. I saw in my upbringing and in my adult life the tangible and the undeniable importance that my union membership played in the quality of my life, my children, my coworkers, and the working class in the United States. My union membership was the #1 factor that allowed my family to sustain a comfortable lifestyle, while other working class families struggled or fell behind. It wasn't the Democrats, and it certainly wasn't the Republicans. It was my membership in the United Auto Workers Union. It is this lived experience that hardened my conviction in collective action, in collective bargaining, and in the collective struggle of the working class in the United States. Politically, I have always been highly suspicious of the conservative call to economic individualism, which I think is code for outright selfishness. My lived experience had proven to me undoubtedly that safety and security for me and my fellow workers lies in solidarity. I saw firsthand how the detachment from this solidarity cast workers into a barbaric race to the bottom, where powerful businesses and corporations drove down wages, benefits, and the quality of life lower and lower and lower. It has always been logically clear to me that the rich and powerful understand this instinctually. The Rockefellers, the Bill Gates, they know this. It is fundamental that they naturally oppose our working class solidarity. It's in their best interest to have us divided, to have us thinking about blue and red and not rich and poor. In the United States, this opposition has always and most vigorously consolidated within the Republican Party. The Republican Party is fundamentally opposed to collective bargaining and has an extremely hostile and confrontational attitude towards unions. The Republican Party, contrary to what Wilk and Dan have said, yes, they may be, Reagan was a member of SAG and all this kind of openness to unions, but to a man, when the rubber meets the road, the Republicans will always fight against collective bargaining. And that is a historical fact. This on its face disqualifies it entirely from ever claiming to represent the interests of the American working class. I knew this instinctively growing up. I learned more through readings and the history of anti-labor forces in the USA, and I am convinced now, after living smack dab in the middle of the American working class, that worker identification with the objectives and the beliefs of the Republican Party is categorically impossible. I look forward to this discussion.
Perfect timing. All right. I am now looking for questions. Let's go back here. Question for our speaker.
Madam Chairman.
Chair, thank you.
If that is the case, why do so many United Auto Workers still vote Republican?
A simple question.
It is a very simple question, and I think it's a situation, and it was Dan highlighted it perfectly. And I've had those conversations with the guys who want their guns, or they want to, chastise LGBTQ people for being who they are, or they want to protect an idea of masculinity and a patriarchy that says, no, I went through the apprenticeship and I got my journeyman's card and I did it, so why can't these people? It's horrific, and I've tried my best to rebuttal that at many coffee breaks. But one thing I will challenge is the working class is not just, excuse Jesse, white, male. The working class is women. Thank you. I mean, I'm just randomly thinking there's a lot of women here, and there's no women up here. And that's replicated in our leadership, both in the UAW and in national politics. And that is not just on its face representative of the working class. My dad drove a truck, was represented by Teamsters. My mom was a nurse. St. John's Hospital battled the union for 40 years. Those nurses tried to organize for 40 years, and they were denied. So yes, I would say, thank goodness, if you include the white male working class, there's a lot of what you're talking about. Guns, anti-woke. They put stickers on their trucks with people urinating on each other. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre political formulation. But I would say, if you look at the entirety of working class, if you look at women, if you look at African Americans, Asian Americans, if you look at Muslim Americans, if you look at, we're in the heart of Dearborn. I want to give a shout out to Representative Rashida Tlaib. To me, Rashida Tlaib represents what the working class should be, with representation in the halls of Congress.
Thank you.
Let's go here for a question.
Madam Chair. The question I have is, I don't know if it's just been in the recent years of politicians, but here we all are, just regular folk. We have all these people in Washington. So how can we define working classes when we have a whole bunch of politicians standing in Washington that contend they're for the working class, but now have become billionaires working on our hard-earned dollars? I don't understand it.
Thank you.
Is that a question?
That's a question
Okay.
to our speaker.
I think that's an essential question. What the question to the group was a question of representation. Right now, I don't care if it's Democrats, I don't care if it's Republicans, search their bios. How many have driven a truck? How many have worked in a grocery store? How many have worked in a hotel kitchen? I would say maybe if somebody could point one out to me, I would be surprised. These are people, thank you, you did it. She said AOC, famously worked as a waitress.
But now she's a millionaire.
Well,
Like,
okay.
I want their financial advisors.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would say, to answer your question, it's one I've pondered. Run for office. If you can't physically run for office, encourage your child, if they're of age, to run for office. Or a cousin or somebody who's interested in politics. Start at the local level. Start at the library board. Start at your city commission. I served 2 terms in the Pleasant Ridge City Commission. I was elected twice, did 8 years. That was a great experience to see how politics works behind the scenes. Because you're right, I'm so frustrated with the TV, whether it's CNN or Fox, giving us these polished people who are just spewing nonsense, hate in the most diabolical of cases. So my faith, I don't have much, but one of the cornerstones of my faith is regular people running for office.
Yeah. My dad tried to do it and he couldn't. So.
All right. And we'll do one more question. I did see this hand back there first. So, and then we go to our lightning round.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question in listening to the speaker is something that, frankly, all of the speakers generated this question for me, which is that it's not is the premise of the question wrong to begin with? Is it that Republicans or Democrats are for the working people? Is it not instead, is our democracy for the working people? And I'm curious what the speaker might say about not a third party, not running for office, but having another system altogether where people are drawn to decision-making positions in a process, like a sortition process, like a lottery process, so that we do have that representation.
A question about the fundamentals of our democratic system to the speaker.
Thank you. No, it's a key question, and this is an incredible format, and I thank Jesse and everyone who worked to put this together, and I appreciate you approaching with that question, because when I was a young person, branches of government, the founding fathers, all this stuff, as I've educated myself, I've learned about the founding of this country, and I've learned about the system that we operate in currently. And I don't want to ruin anyone's, get to the end, but it's not the most democratic system out there. This is one of my constant rebuttals. When you look at the paid days off of work, compared between the United States and pretty much any other democracy in the civilized world. I'll take the European parliamentary systems, for example. France, Belgium, Germany, Italy, the UK. Weeks of paid time off that the company is required to pay for their citizens to have a human life outside of the toils of labor. This is like a natural function of people in a democracy saying, hey, we've been working really hard. Maybe we need some time off. That is not available, nor has it ever been available. Going back to the founding slavery institutions where we had literal chattel, we locked people up to do our labor. This system was not set up for democracy. It was not set up for us to have paid time off. So what we have to do is work within the confines of the system. I'm all for you. What I'm recognizing the question. So abolishing things like the Electoral College, abolishing things like gerrymandering. We've made improvements in Michigan for gerrymandering, trying to make it a little more democratic in this country. But yeah, it's bleak. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. And with that, our speaker and questioners are thanked. We now begin our final round. There will be no questions. We will simply go. We're going to do 3 minutes each. We got a little bit of a late start. I had promised them 4. We're doing 3. So with 3 minutes, we will go to Dan, then Jason, then Wilk, and then Harold. Dan, 3 minutes.
Well, I guess a question that has arisen through this whole panel and discussion, and kind of goes beyond the framing of the debate itself, is what kind of economy do we expect America to have in the 21st century and forward? On this panel, while we're discussing the working class, it's very easy to say that it would be much better to have the kind of economy we had, if not 100 years ago, then maybe 50, 60, 75 years ago. But especially in the post-war era, when you have sort of the golden age of American labor unions, American middle incomes, you have the rest of the world not in being a very competitive shape with us. You have yet to see the rise of Chinese industrialism at that point. Germany and Japan are very quickly reindustrializing, very quickly becoming great powers, economically speaking, but have not yet reached their zenith, and they very quickly will after that stage. And of course, they're very competitive. And competition, especially from Japan in the 1970s and 1980s, is one of the things that drives America to change the way it approaches labor politics and the politics in general of free market economics in the United States. So there is going to be this international question here. And the argument we haven't heard on this panel, because it really comes from the opposite direction, is that in fact free trade and offshoring and so forth have brought American consumers cheap goods, and it has created a situation that Americans they've all been very happy with their iPhones and with other devices. There are trade-offs. So if you go back to an economy that tries to be more like that of the 1950s or the 1960s, you also may have higher prices. You may have any number of things that you're not going to like. It seems to me that the trade-offs involved here require, careful judgment on the part of the American people, and also an awareness that golden ages cannot be recovered. And even though, as Harold had said, the 1950s is often seen by conservatives in a sort of romanticized way as being a golden age for the nuclear family, none of that's coming back either socially or economically, simply because of the state of the world right now. That's not to say that we're powerless to create, a new century that may have attributes that we prefer, either socially or economically. but it is to say that we're going to face very new challenges. And I think that's one reason why both parties have to be much more dynamic and open to questioning their assumptions. They cannot simply habitually act the way they've acted in the 1990s and the 2000s. And so I'm encouraged by the actual fractures and the competition I see within the Republican Party. I think it's good that it has, a clash of ideas and a clash of interests. And I think the Democrats need to have a little more of a free flow of ideas and conflict within their party as well.
Thank you to our speaker. Back to Jason.
And I'm just responding.
Just anything that you wish to follow up on.
Really? Anything?
Within the Braver Angels way.
Anything? Okay. No, this is the crucial question, and this is the American question. I mean, this was the question that the white rich people who founded our country were wrestling with. Who's going to do all the work? Well, they answered that question horribly at the founding of this country. It took us, hundreds of years to make some progress on that. But I think the motivations of the leaders of this country are very similar to what they were in the founding. We're going to protect our wealth. We're going to protect our power. We're going to set up a system of checks and balances that are, the founders were more concerned about the rabble, which another surprise, the rabble's us. So they were more worried about controlling the rabble than they were about the French on the continent or the crown. They were worried about the people rising up, and they've made it very, very difficult for us to do that. I would say the best chance that the working class has is to organize a multicultural working class movement outside of what Donald Trump says, outside of what Nancy Pelosi says, and try and take over the government as is. And then when the workers of this country control, then maybe we'll see legitimate reform. Until that time comes, I'm not very confident. But part of this discussion, and I appreciate everyone that's participating right now, is so crucial, because I feel like we are all on the same team. I work for a living. I'm probably going to work close to when I die. I just had a gentleman, he was a pipe fitter, worked alongside me for 15 years. We celebrated his retirement. He died less than a week after he retired. A life of toil. He had a UAW pension. Fortunately, his spouse was able to inherit that. But come on, we're better than that. I keep hearing how this is like the greatest democracy ever and the world's greatest superpower and the economic engine of the world. Well, why aren't we seeing the benefits of that? Why was that taken away from us over the last 40 years? And why can't we go back to taxing rich people at 92%? And why can't we have 50% unionization like we had in the great state of Michigan? So things like this, yes, it's going to take dialogue, but, I hope we get there.
3 minutes to Wilk.
Freedom is a big thing, right? Freedom for people to choose who they are going to associate with and the companies that they are going to work for and how we are going to do things as a society. So the Republican Party is probably not the perfect answer for any of these questions. I think our political system has fundamental problems. I think our politicians have more fundamental problems. We need to think about that when we are choosing the people who represent us. I'll go back to where I started and say that a soul or the soul of a political party is revealed not only in its policies, but in the people who believe in it. The policies that we live by as a civilized society have to be agreed upon in large part by enough of the people to to live by them. The country we live in, the policies that we live by, have provided more freedom for the people of this country, more opportunity for the people of this country, more wealth for the people of this country than any other country in the civilized world. Yes, it takes work. But one thing I say quite often is freedom does have consequences. The freedom to do great things comes with the freedom to fail. We as a nation do need to do better, to provide better things for the least fortunate among us. But I will say this, going back to the resolution at hand today, the Republican Party is no longer the party of Wall Street or country club elites. There are many in there, but it's not the party built upon Wall Street or the country club elites. It is the party of welders and truck drivers, warehouse workers, and small business owners. These people all make the decision to get into the fields that they get into and work in the industries that they are, in large part due to freedom. The Republican Party, in my opinion, stands as and is the party that speaks to the dignity of work, the value of tradition, and the promise of opportunity for all Americans. So from the dock floors, warehouses, loading docks, truck stops, wherever throughout America, all the way to the voting booths, people have shown themselves that the Republican Party is the party of the working class. It's been shown in every national election for the past several years, and I believe it's going to continue to be that party because it is the party that speaks to the values and things that we talk about as working class Americans at our kitchen tables. The Republican Party is we the people.
And for our final speech, to Harold.
I don't remember when the working class voted to be underpaid. When was that vote held? I want to talk about a few things. Dan noted rightly that we can't go back to the mid-20th century period of really being able to manage the economy domestically. That's true, but just because we were dominant at the end of World War II didn't mean we would have a more egalitarian structure. That was a political struggle that came out of the New Deal. That was powerful unions that, were the essential element of that post-war prosperity. Second point, what's wrong with our politics? There are a lot of things, but we need to focus on the role of money. And we need to understand that when the Republican Congressional Committee and the Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee go searching for candidates, they really love candidates that are rich, that can fund their own campaigns. That enables them to funnel the money that these national committees raise into the campaigns of candidates who can't fund their own campaigns. Well, over the years, as people here have noted, that leads to a rather, plutocratic, rich folk, representation on in the Senate more than the House, because it costs more to run for the Senate. But really, if we're looking at the role of the Republican Party, it was Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices in a 1970s case, Buckley v. Vallejo, and a 2013 case, Citizens United, that really opened the spigots for money's domination. And look, money dominates in both political parties. I mean, I think all of our speakers have made that clear. None of us are giving unqualified defenses of one party or the other as being, in some sense, purely working class. But finally, on the decline of unions, which I think is key, Democrats have been trying to reform labor law so that, for instance, when employers violate labor law by illegally firing a worker in an organizing campaign, that employer has to do more than post a notice saying I did wrong and pay that individual worker, what that worker lost. Look, this has come up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 10s, and aughts, and it's never gotten Republican votes to change the labor law. So at least employers have to pay something for deterring unionization by firing workers illegally, which is common practice and almost universal practice. So if we're talking about the freedom to associate, the freedom to join, and the freedom to, give the working class a little higher share of the national income, we need that legislation, and Republicans ain't gonna give it to us.
Perfect timing. And with that, our speakers are all thanked. Thank you so much, you guys. This was a fascinating conversation. Thank you to all of you who came out to see it, and to all of you who are watching online. Now, we do have some snacks here. Sorry to those of you watching online. We can't get that through YouTube yet. We're working on that technology, I'm sure. Ask ChatGPT, see what it can do for you. But in the meantime, we do have a couple things we have to do before we wind down this part, which is we end every Braver Angels debate with our debrief. Well, actually, no, I haven't adjourned yet. We are going to adjourn in just a minute. But once we do, the next thing is the debrief, where I ask you, what did you learn? What did you enjoy? What will you take away from today's conversation? So think about that for just a moment. And then after we do that, I'm going to have the Michigan team come up here and just give you some announcements. But first, I am looking for a motion to adjourn. Do I have such a motion? Do I have a second? Thank you. Seeing the lateness of the hour, we are now adjourned. I am no longer Madam Chair. You can speak to any of the speakers or me or anyone else as you. Still try to use the Braver Angels way. Yeah, go for it, Wilk. We've been keeping people very patient, I know, but I do want to know, what did you learn? What did you enjoy? I heard, I think I saw some hands. Let's go here. And I want our people listening to come up here and tell me. Come get in line. We'll take about 3 people. So he said, you can be smart on labor issues and wrong on dogs. So, anyone else? Yeah, come up to the microphone. What did you learn? What will you take away from this conversation today?
What I learned is there's a huge dissatisfaction with both political parties, and that we are at a time where there needs to be realignments. And, I don't know. I had questions to ask, certainly, but it seems there's a great deal of frustration with the way the political system works today.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you for that observation. Anyone else? Microphone's open. Everyone's hungry. Everyone wants the drinks. Okay. All right. Yes, one more. Let's go here.
My name is Ron Rickard. I'm about 50 or 60 miles north of Detroit. And for about the last 50 years, my county has gotten poorer. Okay. I just want to tell you, I really appreciated everybody's point of view. Okay. Number one. And number two, I've heard a lot of people debate on both sides. People like Colin Powell, Newt Gingrich. And when they're asked, what is the greatest danger of the United States? They say that we can't find compromise, that the two parties can't get together and they can't resolve problems. And I'm just wondering if the 4 of you agree with that.
If you wish, here. Technically, we're done with the debate, so this will be the last time for
Technically, but not really. I really appreciate that point, because one of my frustrations getting more involved with the political process as a working class, who's fundamentally part of the working class, is this concept. I mean, God rest Colin Powell. I mean, I don't know if I would go that far, but to the point of bipartisanship, it's different to say, let's be bipartisan when we have equal skin in the game. I can do that. If I have a pile of bouillon and you have a pile of bouillon, let's be bipartisan. It's different when you have the pile of bouillon and my kid can't eat, my kid can't go to college, my aunt dies because she can't get health care. I'm sorry, that's not bipartisanship in my book. And I feel like the era of bipartisanship has been catastrophic for the working class.
Of course.
Less. I would point out, Dan referenced Josh Hawley as sort of at the forefront of a little more coherent working class, even occasionally working class economics. There are some pieces of legislation co-authored by Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders. So this is more like not coming together in moderation, but a configuration that is two different flavors of pro-worker, but they can agree on some stuff. Take whatever hope from that you want to.
And do either of our affirmatives? Yes.
Yeah, even though I think I would disagree with Jason on a number of very substantial questions, I will second very much his remarks that we've had a little too much agreement, actually, of the wrong kind in Washington, D.C. for a long time. And often what that winds up doing is that you have a kind of kabuki or an artificial debate in Washington where it's very clear what Democrats and Republicans are saying, but there are actually people within both parties who are silenced and who don't have an opportunity to object and to say that things are on the wrong track. And when you suppress that kind of dissent for too long, what you wind up doing is getting eventually a populist eruption, because the people say we are not really represented by either party, and therefore, once you get a voice that's able to get especially a presidential nomination in either of the parties, that voice simply as an outsider, simply as someone who's saying words that go against everything that Washington, D.C. and Wall Street believes, that person will now then have a tremendous amount of popular support, even if people have reservations about particular aspects of the character or the policies that person might have. Well, obviously right now there's a clear person to whom that could apply, but no, the warning for the Republicans here is that you can't just make imitations of what you're doing now. That you could very easily have the next Bernie Sanders or someone else will come along, and the Republicans could find themselves as wrong-footed as the Democrats perhaps are right now under Trump.
Wilk, any last thoughts on what hope places we can agree on the bipartisan issue?
So the bipartisan issue is weird because bipartisanship is, in my sense, it's not actually a thing, because there is no true bipartisan. It's a spectrum, and to pretend that this thing is just the Republicans are a monolith group over here, and the Democrats are a monolithic group here, and everybody within those groups believes the same thing. That's where we run into our biggest problem, right? That's where the us versus them thing continues to metastasize, I guess, is if we continue to believe that there is no individualist thinking, and there is no group, there is no party, there is no, I don't care whether it's the class divide or the sexual orientation divide or males versus females or whatever. There is no such thing as a monolithic thinking group. And to pretend that we can continue to shut down any dissenting voices and make it so that if you dare step out of line or dare work with the other side or dare to stand up to the standard party thinking as it is today, that we will banish you and shun you from all anything productive, let's just say. I think it's horrific. And we need to, as people, stand up and work more closely with people, as Jason was talking about, work with people in your community. There's a concept called subsidiarity, which I talk a lot about, and that's taking care of problems at the lowest level possible. I think we need to work more on that instead of pretending that the federal government is the answer to our problems. It's not the answer to, nor the solution, or it's not the cause of, nor the solution to all of our problems. We got to quit pretending that it is.
Let's give our panel one more hand, please. Thank you so much, you guys. And now I would like to hand the microphone to our leaders here in Michigan. Any of you want to come up? Who's on tap? David? This one's turned on. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, did everyone feel heard? Did you what did you think? You know, for me, the concept when Jesse first talked about Coliseum debate, I thought of the movie Gladiator. This was so not Gladiator. What'd you think? Did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy this? Good. So I'm David Joseph. Braver Angels, we typically have 2 state coordinators. I am the coordinator that identifies as blue. Jim here, my partner, is a coordinator that identifies as red. When we talk and have conversations, we don't know who's what. This type of discourse is what is our mission at Braver Angels. And so the intention is to provide a space where you can come and feel heard, where you can express your views without judgment, and everyone is treated with a great amount of respect. So I thank you for being here. Thank the panelists. Jason, you remind me of one of my favorite machine repairmen when I was a supervisor, but that's another story. So we do several workshops. We have meetups at Panera Breads. We have a Washtenaw County Alliance. In our group, if you're involved in local, stand up. Braver Angels here. Dennis, yes. That's Stacy over there by the coffee and chips and everything. But so we have various workshops. What you see on some of the tables is a QR code and a sheet where you can scan this and get linked up to several activities that we have. Or you can just talk to Jim and I, or Hillary, or Stacy, or Benita. We're here, and we can tell you all about the activities that we're doing here. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Yeah, I don't really have anything more to say other than thanks for everybody who was here. We really appreciate it. This is lots of fun. Thank you for doing it here. We are very happy to have all of you here. So again, as David said, we'll be around, and if you want to talk about anything, we would love to do that. So thanks for coming.
And one last thing. Can we give a round of applause to Jesse? Jesse did a workshop for us yesterday on organizing and debate prep at the Northville Library. And I had the pleasure of meeting her mom, who was there. And I just said, you are responsible for this force of nature. So thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, David.
That's all I have.
When David met my mom, he did not say you're responsible for this force of nature. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, everyone. You guys make this movement possible. It's great to have you here. Go have some drinks on Braver Angels. Go have some food. We're here. I know we're supposed to end at 5 or at 4. We have this room till 5. I'll be here. Come chat with your local leaders, chat with the panel. Unless they want to run away, they're free to do that now. But I hope, enjoy yourselves. Thank you for coming, everyone.